In the late 90s, a game called Fallout popularized deep and complex storytelling in video games. However, as the series evolved, many fans began criticizing it for denying its core mechanics and targeting the casual audience. But did you know that finding a new identity was the only way for franchise to survive? I am the games guru, your nostalgia time machine, and this is the story of Fallout's fight for survival. In the year 1989, Tim Kaine, a student at University of California, had just completed his master's degree in computer science. Driven by his passion for game development, he quickly landed a position at Interplay Entertainment. After 5 years of dedicated work, Tim developed his own isometric game engine and presented it to his superiors, hoping for a promotion. The directors were not overly impressed, seeing it as just another engine in a crowded market. However, recognizing Tim's talent and potential, they decided to give him a chance, tasking him with developing a standalone game to showcase his engine's full capabilities. Initially, the studio wanted a sequel to their successful role-playing game. However, copyright issues forced them to pivot to creating a brand new RPG title, adding yet another challenge for Tim to overcome. Tim began by programming gameplay mechanics and refining his engine, initially working alone on this vast project. Gradually, he enlisted the help of other Interplay developers, eventually forming a team known as Black Isle Studios. To stand out in an oversaturated market, they decided against a typical fantasy setting. Instead, they drew inspiration from various post-apocalyptic films, crafting a unique world initially called Armageddon. However, since another Interplay project had claimed that title, they renamed it to Fallout. For the game's role-playing mechanics, the team initially considered using the D&D system. However, realizing it didn't fit into Fallout's setting, they switched to GURPS, a universal role-playing system. However, when GURPS's creators saw the game's first demo, they were shocked by its graphic violence and immediately revoked the license. This setback forced Black Isle Studios to create their own role-playing system with less than 2 weeks before a crucial presentation to Interplay's directors. They devised 7 stats: endurance, perception, intelligence, strength, charisma, agility, and luck, abbreviated as EPISCAL. However, the game's art director, Leonid Boyarsky, suggested rearranging the letters to form a more compelling name: Special. When the game was finally presented to Interplay, it made a profound impression on the executives. Although some controversial changes were demanded, a compromise was reached. And in October 1997, Fallout met its release. The game received immediate acclaim from both gamers and critics, who unanimously praised its RPG system, hailing Fallout as the best role-playing game ever released. However, it had room for technological and design improvements, and despite receiving an average score of 89%, it sold just over 500,000 copies, which wasn't impressive for a project of that size. Nevertheless, the positive response of the industry motivated Interplay to greenlight a sequel, only to discover that Black Isle Studios had already begun developing Fallout 2 several months before the original game's release. Building on the foundation of its predecessor, Fallout 2 expanded the world and deepened the narrative complexity. It introduced new factions, more quests, and an even richer storyline. The game retained the dark humor and moral ambiguity that fans loved, while adding new features like the ability to become a porn star or join a crime family. Interplay expanded the development team and allocated more resources to the project, but were forced to place it under a tight schedule. Black Isle Studios had to rush the sequel in under 9 months, which was a significant challenge given that the original game had taken over 3 years to develop. Consequently, Fallout 2 was released in October 1998 and was hailed as one of the best RPGs of the year. However, the expanded world alone wasn't enough to attract a lot of players, and loads of bugs and glitches, which appeared due to the short development period, turned away even the existing fans, leading to disappointing sales of about 120,000 copies despite the positive reception. Following this setback, Interplay started to experience severe financial difficulties. In an attempt to recover, they tried to make their games appeal to a broader audience and ventured into the console market. While the main team of Black Isle Studios was busy developing the third entry in the series, Interplay ordered other teams to develop 2 consecutive spin-offs focused on the in-game faction Brotherhood of Steel. These spin-offs were designed to emphasize action over role-playing elements, which was met with restraint by both fans and critics. Tim Kaine, the series' creative father, attempted to boycott this decision, but the spin-offs were released anyway in 2001 and 2004, respectively. Despite being well-made games with decent average scores, they both failed to attract new fans or please existing ones, collectively selling just over 500,000 copies. Around the same time, Interplay canceled Fallout 3, codenamed Van Buren, which already had a playable demo. Following the devastating failure of Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, most of the Black Isle employees began to doubt the adequacy of their bosses. They decided to resign from Interplay and founded their own companies, Obsidian Entertainment and Troika Games. After that, Interplay promptly dissolved the division and sold the rights to Fallout at an auction. Obsidian and Troika gathered all their resources, preparing to battle each other in the auction, but were both overbidden by a bigger and far more experienced competitor, Bethesda. By 2004, Bethesda Softworks was already a giant publisher, with dozens of successful games under its belt. Renowned in the RPG world for their The Elder Scrolls series, Bethesda sought to expand their catalog with another major project. Development on Fallout 3 began in late 2004 with a small team of around 10 people, as most of Bethesda's staff was busy working on The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Only after Oblivion was released in 2006, the team size increased to 75 people, and development proceeded at full speed. In multiple interviews, Bethesda developers noted the difficulty of working on a game from an established series with which they had no prior connections. Additionally, the studio refused to hire anyone who had previously worked on the original games, mandating the use of the first Fallout game as a model for designing Fallout 3. Bethesda sought to incorporate elements of first-person shooter games while also allowing players to approach combat with the tactical nuance commonly found in role-playing games. Executive producer Todd Howard
Excuse me, hold on.
aimed for a mix of real-time and turn-based combat, leading to the creation of the VATS system. Bethesda developers later discussed how they felt the shooting mechanics in Fallout 3 were one of the weakest elements of the game. However, the core of the game was so good that the mediocrity of the shooting mechanics simply didn't matter. The game featured first-class music and sound design, innovative role-playing mechanics, and a captivating storyline, which set the Guinness World Record for the most lines of dialogue in a single-player role-playing game. To voice all that, Bethesda invited over 100 voice actors, including celebrities like Liam Neeson and Malcolm McDowell. Fallout 3 was finally released in October 2008 and became an overnight success, shipping 5 million copies in the first month alone. The transition from isometric to 3D world rendering made the game more competitive in the market, and the respect for the franchise's legacy and passion for the genre helped the game achieve bestseller status, trailing only behind GTA 4. However, it wasn't without its flaws, as Fallout 3 was censored in several countries for its contents. In Australia, it was censored for the use of morphine. In Germany, for excessive blood and gore. In Japan, for its depiction of nuclear weaponry. And in India, for cultural and religious sentiments. Nevertheless, these problems seemed petty compared to the deafening success of the game, as Fallout 3 received an average rating of 91%, sold a total of 12 million copies throughout its lifespan, and garnered multiple Game of the Year nominations and awards. Proud of their work, Bethesda embarked on developing Skyrim, which would later emerge as one of the most influential RPG games of all time. However, the unexpected success of Fallout 3 attracted many new fans to the series, who passionately researched every rumor about the next series entry. Recognizing this interest, Bethesda's parent company decided to outsource a spin-off for Fallout, choosing Obsidian Entertainment for the task. Obsidian's management consisted of several key developers of Fallout 2 and the Van Buren project. The studio had previously declined Bethesda's offer for partnership, but changed their minds when Fallout became the subject. To sweeten the deal, Bethesda promised to pay a huge bonus if the game achieved an 85-point score on Metacritic, which was an offer that the young struggling studio simply couldn't ignore. Utilizing all their passion, talent, and previous plans for the series, they began work on Fallout Sin City, which was later renamed to New Vegas. Many design choices and story elements were taken straight out of the cancelled Van Buren, such as the conflict between the NCR and Caesar's Legion, and the battle at Hoover Dam. Although Obsidian was given a short development period of 18 months, they managed not only to deliver a quality product, but also to introduce a deeper role-playing system, improved combat mechanics, and a richer lore, incorporating over 65,000 lines of dialogue, surpassing Fallout 3's record by more than 50%. Despite the release of several role-playing games that year, when Fallout New Vegas launched in October 2010, it created fierce competition, selling a staggering 11 million copies. New Vegas was so well received that many fans of the series still consider it the best entry in the entire franchise. However, not everything was so perfect, as the game was heavily criticized for poor optimization and the lack of technological improvements, resulting in an average score of 84%. Given the results, Obsidian was deprived of their bonus. The studio's CEO Fergus Urquhart later acknowledged that Obsidian objectively missed their end of the deal, but Bethesda still faced public backlash for their decision. In the following 2011, the success of Skyrim catapulted Bethesda to the top of the gaming industry. However, entering the big leagues also meant facing bigger competitors. On one hand, Bethesda loved their games, but they also needed to make more money to survive in the capitalistic market. Before the boom of microtransactions, the primary way to increase revenue was by selling more copies, which required appealing to a broader casual audience. Thus, for Fallout 4, Bethesda introduced base-building mechanics, a simplified dialogue system, and emphasized action elements, while simplifying the core role-playing system. These controversial decisions expectedly disappointed many fans of the series who felt a sting of betrayal. The depth and challenge they cherished were diluted, and critics pointed out that the game had become more of a survival shooter with RPG elements tacked on, rather than a true role-playing game. The base-building mechanic was a prime example of this shift. While it added a new dimension to the game, it also detracted from the narrative and role-playing elements that had previously defined the series. The simplified dialogue system, which reduced conversations to a few vague choices, further alienated fans who missed the intricate, branching dialogues of the earlier games. To promote the release, Bethesda organized a powerful advertising campaign. And when Fallout 4 was launched in November 2015, it garnered an average rating of 87% from critics, sold 25 million copies, and received over a dozen nominations and awards. Fallout 4's success was undeniable, but it came at the cost of the franchise's core identity. The game was streamlined, accessible, and designed to appeal to a broader audience, but in doing so, it lost the complexity and depth that had made Fallout a beloved series among hardcore gamers. Then came Fallout 76 in 2018. Bethesda's attempt to create an online role-playing experience resulted in one of the most disastrous launches in gaming history. The game was plagued with bugs, didn't have NPCs, and was clearly unfinished. Despite these issues, the project was aggressively monetized via microtransactions, DLCs, and other unpleasant means. For many fans, this was the final straw, as they saw how the franchise that once set the standards for immersive gameplay had become a symbol of corporate greed and mismanagement. However, Bethesda didn't abandon the project and has been supporting it with patches ever since the game's launch in November 2018. Though, it didn't help to improve the ratings, as Fallout 76 still averages around 50%. It sold approximately 11 million copies, with an additional 6 million copies sold within a month after the release of the Fallout TV series by Amazon. The story of Fallout serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between innovation and tradition. Bethesda's efforts to modernize and expand the franchise brought it unprecedented success, but also led to a loss of the depth and complexity that had always defined the series. Fallout's fate reminds of Call of Duty, that started off as the most respected military shooter in the industry, but ended up becoming a scammy cash cow. Click here to watch my documentary on the Call of Duty franchise, which in similar fashion covers the history of the series. I am the games guru. The replacement to AI voice is coming soon. Love you all, and I see you in the next video. Bye-bye.